Do you know how economic collapses really begin? It's not with panic, headlines, or people lining up at banks. It's with something far quieter, far more deceptive: confidence. It's a strange and uncomfortable truth that history teaches us again and again. Before every single major economic collapse, there's a hidden phase. A period where everything on the surface looks not just stable but healthy. This phase is dangerous precisely because it feels so normal, so right. It's the calm before a storm you don't even know is gathering. Let's dive into this pattern, because understanding it is the key to seeing what others miss. Think back to the Roaring Twenties, just before the Great Depression of 1929. What was the mood? Pure euphoria. The stock market was a rocket ship that only went up. Getting credit was easier than ever before. Optimism wasn't just a feeling, it was the engine of the economy. Everyone believed they were on the verge of permanent prosperity. But look closer, underneath that shiny surface. What was really happening? Debt levels weren't just rising, they were exploding, quietly and relentlessly. Speculation, the act of betting on prices, had completely overshadowed real, tangible productivity. People were making fortunes from paper, not from building things or creating value. The warning signs were all there, but they didn't look like warnings. They looked like success. Now let's fast forward to Japan in the late 1980s, right before its infamous asset bubble collapse. The story is eerily similar. Real estate prices in Tokyo were so astronomical that the Imperial Palace grounds were supposedly worth more than all the real estate in California. The stock market, the Nikkei, was hitting record highs day after day. Banks were practically throwing money at people and businesses, expanding credit with an aggression that seemed bold and visionary. In this environment, risk became invisible. Everyone assumed that the growth was structural, that Japan had discovered a new, superior economic model. They believed the growth was permanent. It wasn't. When the bubble burst in 1990, it led to what is now known as the lost decade, a period of economic stagnation that some argue continues to this day. The confidence was total, right up until the moment it vanished. And of course we have the 2008 global financial crisis, a moment that is still fresh in our collective memory. The story we often hear is that the collapse happened because the housing market crashed. But that's not the full picture. The real story is about the hidden phase that came before it. The system didn't just break when housing prices started to fall. The collapse became inevitable long before that, because the entire global financial system had been built on a mountain of leverage. Complex financial instruments like mortgage-backed securities and credit default swaps were sold as sophisticated, low-risk innovations. They were anything but. They were designed to hide risk, to make it disappear from balance sheets. Leverage reached a point where even a small shock, like a dip in regional housing prices, could trigger a catastrophic, cascading failure across the entire system. The weakness wasn't the fall in prices. It was the fragility that had been built up for years under the banner of stability and financial genius. So, what are the common threads in this hidden phase? What are the telltale signs that we can look for? History shows us 4 key characteristics that appear every single time. First, and most importantly, debt grows faster than income. This isn't just about government deficits, though that's part of it. It's about households taking on more and more debt to maintain their lifestyle. It's about corporations borrowing heavily, not necessarily to invest in new factories or research, but to buy back their own stock, artificially boosting their share price. When debt across the board is consistently outpacing the actual economic output that is supposed to pay for it, you're essentially borrowing from the future. This creates a powerful illusion of prosperity in the present, but it comes at a cost. That bill always comes due. The second characteristic is that risk becomes normalized. In a healthy system, risk is something to be managed and respected. In the hidden phase, it's something to be ignored or engineered away. We saw this with the complex financial products before 2008. They were so complicated that almost nobody understood them, and this complexity was mistaken for safety. The assumption becomes that the system is resilient, that the experts have it all under control. Stability is assumed rather than actively tested. People forget that financial gravity exists. They start to believe that this time is different, that the old rules no longer apply. This is a classic hallmark of collective delusion, and it's a setup for a rude awakening. Third, warnings are actively dismissed. In every one of these pre-collapse periods, there were people who sounded the alarm. There were economists, analysts, or just everyday observers who pointed out the dangerous imbalances. And how were they treated? They were labeled as pessimists, doomsayers, or out-of-touch relics of a bygone era. They were accused of not getting it, of being unable to appreciate the new paradigm. When an entire system's narrative is built on unwavering confidence, anyone who questions that narrative is seen not as a prudent critic, but as an enemy of progress. The social and professional pressure to conform, to stay positive, becomes immense. This silencing of dissent is crucial because it allows the imbalances to grow even larger, unchecked. And finally, the fourth characteristic, policy becomes reactive instead of preventive. Instead of addressing the underlying structural weaknesses, policymakers focus on managing perceptions. Their decisions are aimed at sustaining the appearance of stability and keeping the party going for just a little longer. If the market wobbles, they inject liquidity. If a key indicator dips, they change how it's calculated or explain it away as a temporary anomaly. They treat the symptoms, not the disease. This isn't necessarily a conspiracy. Often is driven by a genuine fear that taking tough, preventive measures would itself trigger the very crisis they are trying to avoid. But by kicking the can down the road, they only ensure that when the crisis finally does hit, it will be far more severe. So here is the most important lesson from all of this, the most crucial takeaway. Economic collapses don't happen when the system is obviously weak and everyone is panicking. They happen when the system believes, with every fiber of its being, that it is strong, innovative, and invincible. The hidden phase is the true point of maximum danger. The collapse itself is just the inevitable consequence. It's the final act of a play that was written years earlier. This hidden phase ends the very moment that collective confidence finally shatters. And once that psychological dam breaks, the collapse is no longer a possibility. It's a mathematical and social certainty. The downward spiral becomes self-reinforcing. By the time the panic is visible in the streets, the game is already over. History doesn't leave us wondering if this hidden phase exists. It shows us with brutal clarity that it always does. It's the one constant in the cycle of boom and bust. So the only real question isn't whether we're in one now or not. The question is whether we have the courage and the clarity to recognize it while we re-in it. Or if, like so many others throughout history, we'll only see it in the rearview mirror after it's already over. Thanks for watching. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the patterns that shape our world. We'll see you in the next one.